part of the reason the liberal project, let's say, has found its logical conclusion is because it's been played out. It's been played out to the end. Look, the same thing happens to the Israelites that's happened to the West. You remember when Moses is called away by God to Mount Sinai so that the commandments can be delivered. Moses leaves the Israelites behind, and he leaves them in the hands of the political voice, Aaron. And so what you see there is what happens to a society when the foundation, the voice of the foundation, disappears. Well, what happens to Aaron is that this is like a populism, you might say, a narrow populism. Aaron gives the people what they want. But see, that's a weird formulation, because the people, properly construed, aren't what they want. If the people devolve into what they want, then the people are possessed by their wants, and that makes them into hedonistic 2-year-olds, right? It's a very weird thing for us to say that we are what we want. You can invert that easily and say, no, now you're possessed by your fractionated whims. You're a puppet on the strings of your whims. Your desire is not
constrained by your reason. It's not
constrained by the future.
Your awareness of the truth and your intuition for the
It's
good.
not constrained by your love for other people. It's not constrained by your responsibility, right? It's free. It has free reign. That's anarchic freedom. Well, that's what happens in the worship of the golden calf. And that's orgiastic hedonism immediately emerges. And you might say, well, why not? Well, Moses actually tells the people, he said, well, first of all, you've become a laughing stock to your enemies, and that's not a very good idea when they're watching, right? And that's something the West should take serious heed of, clearly. But it's more than that. It's that a hedonistic game degenerates as you play it, and that's what makes it wrong. Now, one of the things that I've really noticed as I've lectured in many, many places is that if I do draw the relationship between, let's say, responsible self-sacrifice and meaning, people cotton onto that immediately. And this has especially been true with young men. I say, well, your life is meaningless. You're unable to bear the weight of your suffering. You're weak. You're not a blessing to yourself. You're suffering. Well, why? Well, it's paradoxically, it's because you haven't imposed upon yourself enough constraint. You haven't adopted enough responsibility. You have to stop thinking about your narrow self because you're just a puppet of that. And you have to, well, how about aim up, get married, have some children, put your community in order, like pick up your cross, walk uphill. And that it's not because you should, although you should. It's not because you should. It's because that's where all the meaning is. And that's another piece of evidence that the proper foundation of civilization is voluntary service.
Yeah, and that strikes me as a fundamentally conservative
That's exactly
intuition,
it. That's exactly
because
it.
it's not be the change that you want to be,
Yep.
exercise your freedom,
It's
are
not
independent,
rights as freedom
you're
either.
autonomous. And it works. You will find meaning not just by making it up, not just by constructing it, not just by exercising your freedom, as Sartre and Camus might say.
Yeah.
You know, the existentialists say we're free from essence, we're free from bourgeois
restraint.
morality.
They think of all social being as restraint.
Right. What you've, I think, taught so many young men for many years is that meaning and true freedom comes from accepting the constraints that the world places upon us and trying to operate
Welcoming
welcoming them with an attitude of gratitude,
Yes.
as the Americans like to say, and not with a sense that you can manipulate the world and the world deserves to give you an easy time, to give you an easy life.
Or that other people are imposing on you. It's
Yeah.
like, well, why should I regulate my sexual behavior? What an imposition. The bloody French leftists were all over that, right? Sexual freedom. Well, there's nothing about that isn't golden calf worship.
Right,
It's
and-
preposterous.
And what you're drawing, and you're not saying that means an end to freedom. It's not as if liberalism has a monopoly on freedom. In fact, I think what you seem to be suggesting is that the right way to think about freedom is that we should have the freedom to do what we ought to do, and what we ought to do that will align us with the good, align us with the true, and invest our life with the only kind of meaning worth having, as opposed to mere freedom to do what we want to do, as it
what
were,
the worst in
indulging our
us
untrammelled
wants us
desires.
to do. Yeah, well, this is exactly. So when Moses stands up against the Pharaoh and objects to tyranny, he says something very particular, as you'll remember from the Exodus seminar. He doesn't say, let my people go, which is the civil rights cry, right? He doesn't say that. He says, let my people go, so they may celebrate me in the wilderness, right? So it's a vision of ordered freedom. So you move from tyranny, and that's a movement, but it's not anarchic desert dwelling where you worship the golden calf. It's the construction of a subsidiary hierarchy of responsibility as an alternative to tyranny and slavery.
Can't just be mere emancipation into the sunlit uplands. There's got to be a reason for it, a purpose, and a kind of a horizon that invests it with meaning, a meaning that is given, not just imposed upon the world.
Exactly. And that is what conservatives have to offer young people at the moment. And they will take that up because no one is making that offer. And so they're all lost. Well, we can do whatever we want. It's like, no, you are now the slave to the worst of your whims. And there's nothing that makes people more miserable than that. We know that. The most miserable people at the moment are young, progressive women. Well, why? Well, because they're disintegrated. And so they have no psychological integration. So they're a war of competing forces. They're a house divided against itself. And they have no social affiliation. Well, human beings we're so social. We're so social, you can punish psychopaths by putting them in isolation. We're sacrificial to the core, human beings.
It's certainly striking that the last, 5 or 6 decades that has seen extraordinary changes and in equal pay and many of the legislative victories that feminism worked so hard to achieve has not gone hand in hand with an increase in the sense of psychological well-being and progression. In fact, it seems to be quite the right. Correlation is not causation, and so on. And there are complexities, of course, in analyzing levels of psychological well-being, as you will.
Yeah, but the overall picture is pretty clear.
It's pretty clear.
Yeah.